Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That music means I'm joined by Admiral James Stavridis, who is, of course, retired from the United States Navy. He was the Allied Supreme Commander of NATO, head of Southern Command. I've got lots to talk with him. Good morning, Admiral. How are you?
I'm doing well, Hugh.
I'm not sure I'm ever going to want to look at that shirt that you wore when you flipped the pancakes. That was something else. Was that a joke gift?
Of course it was. And, I'm a Florida native. I'm a proud Florida man. And Florida men like to do pancakes once in a while, especially during pandemic. There you go.
It was it was quite the picture. I want to begin by asking you about Edward Faitner. I read his obit yesterday. I had never read his story before. And Ward Carroll he went to college in Ohio, so he had that going for him. But my gosh, what a life, what a career.
Yeah, just extraordinary. And, as that group of folks kind of moves on, you just have to feel we've lost something.
His nickname is Whitey. He earned his ace. He shot down 9 Japanese Zeros. He fought over Guadalcanal, and he stayed there doing it for 33 years. I know that at the Naval Institute they'll be honoring him, but and Bob Dole yesterday did not celebrate, but marked the 75th anniversary of his wounds in Italy. We're going to miss all the 75ths of VE Day and all these other things that we would ordinarily be focused on, Admiral.
We are. And, I just penned a piece about the Battle of the Atlantic, Hugh, which, of course, was prelude and over in the North Atlantic. And you look at what those sailors went through on those convoys. It was the highest percentage casualty losses of the war in many, many segments. And indeed, we need to tap back into that kind of resilience as we go through what we're facing today.
All right, now to turn to serious subjects. I want to turn to a CNN story yesterday and read you the beginning of it. Chinese naval flotilla headed into the Pacific over the weekend. Evidence that the People's Liberation Army Navy has done a much better job controlling coronavirus than the U.S. Navy, according to a story posted on the People's Liberation Army's English language website. Skipping down a few paragraphs, they quote a Zhu Gongzhu, a senior advisor to China Arms Control and Disarmament Association, saying, through the voyage, the Liaoning showed, that's their aircraft carrier, that the Chinese People's Liberation Army has done a great job in the epidemic prevention and control work, and that COVID-19 epidemic has not had an impact on its deployment and operations. It showed that the PLA can dispatch troops stationed anywhere at any time, with the troops always maintaining vigorous combat capabilities. The Chinese people can always count on them. This is just propaganda, Admiral.
Jeez. Yeah, that's outrageous. And it's outrageous in two dimensions, Hugh. One is the way that it falsely portrays China's abilities. Let's face it, all militaries are going to face the kind of challenges that we are seeing in the case of the Roosevelt. I think the U.S. Navy is coming to grips with that, just like the other U.S. military services. But we're going to do it appropriately. We're going to let the public be informed where it's appropriate to do so. We're certainly not going to have a Potemkin village-like edifice constructed of, hey, we have no problems here. I don't believe that for a minute, nor should anybody else. Secondly, I'm very surprised that any Western news outlet would run a story like that without sufficient fact-checking, without even talking to experts. That's really surprising and disappointing. And lastly, Hugh, stand by, because you're going to hear that storyline, not just about the Chinese military, but about the Chinese model. China will attempt globally to say, look what a terrific job we've done through this whole thing. Look how the United States has struggled to deal with all this. Our authoritarian system is clearly the way to go. We are the machine of the future. Nations should not fall for that. News organizations should not fall for that. And we need to be building our appropriate counter narrative to that.
Now, I have on later in the show one of my favorite guests, former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, has a new book out, Hell and Other Destinations. And she's always funny and alive. But as I read through the book, there's very little on China. And this is a bipartisan blind spot. That's what I call it. We've had a bipartisan blind spot for two generations, and I run the Nixon Foundation. I know when it got started, but it seems our media is unwilling to embrace the actual factual truth that this virus originated in Wuhan, and its acceleration across the globe, perhaps inevitable, but perhaps not, was certainly enabled by the secrecy and at least the reckless negligence, willful negligence of the People's Republic of China, CCP.
That's absolutely correct. And when the history of this is written 100 years from now, that storyline is going to be very clear. And that's part of the countervailing narrative about which I spoke a moment ago, Hugh. We need to be clear-eyed about where this has come from, why it has proliferated so rapidly. You and I were speaking about it in January. You could see how this was going to play out at that point. And the more we tell the truth, the better off we will be. By the way, I love Madeleine Albright. She's a mentor of mine. When I was Supreme Allied Commander, she was chair of our NATO strategy group that rewrote the strategy of NATO going forward. I'll finish by my other favorite Secretary of State, who is the ultimate not the blind spot. That's Henry Kissinger. We need to soak every bit of his knowledge and experience now in dealing with China while we still have him.
I think you'll find Hell and Other Destinations to be a fun read. Now let me turn to a not fun subject and put on your old Southern Command hat. I don't know much about Ecuador, but I've been using it as a point of reference for what's going on in Latin and South America. Guayaquil, where I've never been, and no doubt. Have you been to Guayaquil?
Of course. It's a beautiful city.
Of course you have. It's like books that Al Mohler hasn't read and places that Admiral Stavridis hasn't been. All right. They have been, it's the largest city in Ecuador. It's their business capital. It's on the Pacific. Their official death toll is 173. Their unofficial death toll is in the thousands. They have bodies everywhere. What ought we to be doing to help out Ecuador, and what does it tell you about the situation there that they do not even have an accurate body count or facilities into which to put the dead?
Hey, unfortunately, Hugh, as you look south around the world, buckle up. As we look at countries as huge as Nigeria, as massive as India, as we look at Pakistan, and as we look at Latin America, the favelas of Brazil, the mega cities of the South, to include Guayaquil, we are going to see that scene again and again, unfortunately, because this virus is really occurring in a tale of three cities, if you will. We've seen the responses in Asia, city number one. Now it's in the United States and Europe, city number two. The third city in this story has not got healthcare capability. They don't have robust political structures. They are simply going to have to ride it out and wait for herd immunity. Look for more scenes like that. We can help. We need to engage, but it's going to be a massive effort, not just a precision-guided one in a place like Ecuador. It's really the entire southern part of the world is about to get blasted with this thing.
Now, America rebuilt Europe with the Marshall Plan, and the president has ordered, I think, excess production of ventilators. I assume we're going to become the world's medicine cabinet, but what we really need are vaccines and interventions on a scale that we've never seen before. And I think we just basically have to give them away to everyone in the South, because otherwise, that's our allied continent. I mean, I don't know that we should be focused anywhere as much as abroad as we should be on South America. Do you agree or disagree with that, Admiral?
Well, I completely agree. And after spending 3 years as Commander, U.S. Southern Command, in charge of all military operations south, I'm from South Florida myself. I speak Spanish. I know the region well. I've traveled everywhere in it. It is a land of extraordinary potential for the United States, and particularly, Hugh, as our own Latino population rises as a percentage, 15% of the U.S. today. By mid-century, probably 30%. Those people-to-people connections, north to south, are going to be crucial for us demographically, economically. I completely agree. We had to put a lot more focus than we do on this gorgeous, untapped potential and a part of the world that wants to work with us in the South.
I'm curious, Admiral, last question. There will be convulsions, political convulsions, as a consequence of the virus across the globe, probably nowhere more than in South America. I don't know if they will dislodge Maduro. The world is trying a second approach to him. But which other country do you think is so fragile as to possibly break under this?
I think that in Central America, the countries there already have enormous violence rates, between 50 and 100 violent deaths per 100,000 because of gangs, because of drugs. So I think watch for danger ahead in those congested Central American countries, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador. These are societies under immense pressure, similar to the kind of socioeconomic pressures you see over in Venezuela. I think that is also a place where U.S. assistance can be focused in ways that are very good for our country, because let's face it, the worse it gets there, the more we potentially return to waves of refugees and illegal migration moving north. So watch for Central America. That's where I would focus help.
Very
first.
quickly, Admiral, they had the press conference last week with the chair of the Joint Chiefs and others. We're surging naval assets to interdict cartel movement. Has that ever been effective?
It's not. It can take about 1/3 of the cocaine that's moving north off the table, but you need not only interdiction, that's part of it, but you've also got to go to the source and help these countries find alternatives. And then, Hugh, you and I both know a huge part of this is demand here in the United States. You've got to control supply, demand, and interdiction. It's a false theory that you can stop this thing by simply interdiction.
Admiral James Stavridis, always a pleasure to talk to you. But follow him at Admiral Stav, admiralstav.com, and that's where